The United States Congress has passed several crucial decisions for Ukraine, which will no longer allow Donald Trump's administration to delay or cancel aid to Ukraine. The United States House of Representatives has passed a defense policy bill totaling $892.5 billion. The document provides for allocating funds to assist Ukraine in the field of security, but more importantly, the bill directly prohibits United States Secretary of War Pechiy from stopping any aid to Ukraine. In addition, after Russia's attack on Poland, a bill was introduced in the United States Congress that could completely ban trade with Russia and also designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. My name is Pechiy. Today is September 12th. Let's review the adopted United States defense budget together. And those main key points that concern Ukraine, I'll say right away, they're very important. But before we begin, I want to remind you that on this YouTube channel, several news and analytical segments about events around the world are released every day. So that you stay up to date with absolutely all the news, I recommend subscribing to this YouTube channel. So recently, a very important event took place in the United States Congress, which went largely unnoticed, but is very important for Ukraine. The United States House of Representatives back on Wednesday, September 10, passed a defense policy bill totaling $892.5 billion. And this document provides for allocating $400 million to help Ukraine in the field of security. The purpose of the bill is to streamline and modernize the way the Pentagon defines and meets military needs. In addition, the document is supposed to strengthen United States military readiness, increase service members' salaries, and also ban medical treatment for transgender military personnel. These are services that do not correspond to the gender assigned to a person at birth. Republicans have already pushed this through. The bill also allocates $400 million for the Pentagon's initiative to provide military assistance to Kyiv in the field of security. Although some Republicans were against it, it was only a part of them. It is worth noting that the House of Representatives rejected Marjorie Taylor Greene's proposal to completely cancel funding for Ukraine. And both Republicans and Democrats voted against it. Thus, the base amount of annual American military aid to Ukraine has been increased by $100 million. Because all these previous years, ever since Trump supplied the javelins, this base amount was $300 million. The United States military budget always included $300 million. Now it's $400 million. You can't provide many weapons for $400 million. That's just one package. But, as I already mentioned, when this bill was just being brought up for consideration, the point here is that this is a symbolic step which shows that support for Ukraine in Congress is not disappearing. So the issue here is not about the amount, not about the money, but about the very fact that Congress is once again confirming that aid to Ukraine continues. And let me remind you that United States Secretary of Defense Pechiy wanted to completely cut and remove both this amount and these $300 million from the budget. Mentioning Ukraine here is important. It was the Republicans who insisted on keeping the money for Ukraine and even increasing it. Why increase it? Once again, it was $300 million each year. The relevant committee of the House of Representatives wanted to set it at $500 million, but in the end they agreed on $400 million. But, as I already said, the issue is not about the amount. For the first time, the budget law includes an amendment that requires the Pentagon to notify Congress in advance if the Trump administration suddenly decides to stop or redirect any military aid to Ukraine that was previously approved by Congress. And then Congress must decide whether to stop or suspend such aid to Ukraine. That means it won't be like it was in July, when Pechiy and Elbridge Colby suddenly stopped aid to Ukraine without any explanation, and no one had any idea what was going on. And at that time, unfortunately, the armed forces of Ukraine were forced to retreat from the Kursk region of Russia. Even Trump pretended then, claiming he didn't know about the Ukraine aid freeze. It was all hex, rebellious and so on. Now that's impossible. And one more important point. Once again, the amendment by the grandiose Marjorie Taylor Greene, who proposed to ban all military aid to Ukraine, was rejected. This time, by the way, the vote was 60 to 372. Let me remind you that in July, Marjorie Taylor Greene put this same amendment to a vote, and back then it was supported by 76 to 353. So, the number of opponents of aid to Ukraine has decreased by 16 votes since then. If we talk in percentages, 60 out of 432 congressmen are against Ukraine. That's 14%, so not even a fifth. And now the most important thing. The reason why the United States is not providing direct military aid to Ukraine is not because of a lack of support for Ukraine in Congress or in society, nor because of a lack of money and so on, but because of one specific person, one specific President Donald Trump, and one specific presidential administration for whom Ukraine apparently gets in the way of befriending the bloody dictator Putin. Let me also remind you that the Senate is considering its own version of the Pentagon policy bill, which currently lacks the conservative amendments added to the House bill last week. Work on the document should finish in the coming days, after which lawmakers must reconcile their versions and prepare a final draft for approval by both chambers. After passing all stages, the document goes to the president for signature, and only he can ultimately block aid to Ukraine. And I'm not just asking you to follow this process for no reason. Remember that the House of Representatives allocated $400 million to Ukraine in its version of the bill. Well, the United States Senate Appropriations Committee actually approved $800 million in the Pentagon's budget for the next fiscal year for the Ukraine Security Initiative and another $225 million for the Baltic Security Initiative. So that's actually more than $1 billion. So both the House of Representatives and the United States Senate support military aid to Ukraine and allocate funds for it. If this aid doesn't happen, it will be the fault of one specific person, Donald Trump. And in this regard, I'll add one more piece of news. United States Congressman Joe Wilson has introduced a bill to restore the Jackson-Vanik Amendment in order to achieve a halt in trade with the Russian Federation. Quote, after the attack on Poland, I am grateful for the opportunity to introduce this bill, which provides for the reinstatement of the Jackson-Vanik Amendment with respect to Russia, which means ending all trade with this terrorist dictatorship. According to the Congressman, former President Barack Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry mistakenly repealed this law during the ill-conceived policy, namely the reset of relations with Russia in 2009, which encouraged the war criminal Putin to occupy Crimea. This is a direct quote from Wilson, and here I would like to note that this Jackson-Vanik Amendment is a law of the United States of America, which was adopted back in 1974. It is known that it completely prohibited any normal trade with countries that had so-called bad economies, in cases where these states did not allow people to leave the country. For example, Soviet Union Jews. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the law continued to apply to Russia, but United States presidents froze it every year in order to trade with this so-called country. At the same time, in 2012, the law was repealed and replaced by the Magnitsky Act. These are sanctions targeting specific Russian Federation officials, that's all. Now, Congress is demanding to bring back this bill so that it would actually be in effect. Well, I'll leave it at that. If you still have questions about the budget, the United States military budget, write them in my Telegram channel Pechiy News. The link is in the description of this video. Share your opinions and conclusions in the video comments below. And also, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and don't forget to like the video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone. Subtitles.